everybody. Welcome to the PVD Horror Podcast. My name is Dave, and I am joined here with director, filmmaker, and actor, from what I see in your credits, Anthony Cousins. And he is here to discuss his brand new found footage film that has taken the internet by storm. It is called Frogman. It is about a frogman, and it is awesome. So, Anthony, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you like all things horror and want to get the best horror news, interviews, and reviews,
like, subscribe, and ring that bell to follow us and satisfy all your horror needs.
So some people might be familiar with some of your work from the Scare Package projects, films 1 and 2. You did some work on those. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so those are anthology. It's an anthology franchise. And the whole idea was like each segment playing with a different trope from the horror genre. And so we basically made like a part 4 of a franchise that doesn't exist. And like had a whole lot of fun with the whole concept of the killer that just keeps coming back over and over and over, no matter how many times you can kill him. So we kind of got lucky in that we baked in for ourselves that we're part of a franchise. So we were the only other team besides like the core Paper Street wraparound team to come back for Scare Package 2 because they wanted us to do another installment in our fake slasher franchise. So that was super fun. I mean, I think if you're a horror fan turned filmmaker, getting to do a sequel to something you make is like one of those pie in the sky like bucket list things. So to get to do that even on a small scale like was so much fun to get everyone back together and be like, all right, what happens next?
So you guys did a part 4 and a part 6, right?
Yeah.
So you skipped right over 5.
Yeah.
And I just love that. It's just so random. But I like this idea of you guys like playing around with horror tropes and things like that. Because I think that in a way you kind of do that with Frogman as well, playing around with a lot of different tropes. So it's interesting kind of seeing that origin. And then you've also done a number of like short films and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I did a whole lot of terrible stuff that no one should ever watch. And then in 2016, I made something called When Susurrus Stirs, which turned out all right.
Okay.
And that kind of kicked off like where I'm at now. So that was like kind of a fun Cronenbergian body horror thing.
Cool.
After that, I did The Bloody Ballad of Squirt Reynolds, which was like Friday the 13th meets Wet Hot American Summer, kind of, or at least that's what the feature version of that would be. But I really just wanted to do some like crazy, goofy kills. And that's actually what got me Scare Package. Was Paper Street saw that and was like, you're perfect for doing horror tropes. And actually on that point, for me, like we did part 4, the final kill, which is obviously inspired by the final chapter, the 13th. So in my mind, part 5, I don't know exactly what happened in part 5, but it would be called The Night He Came Back Again, part 5, the night he didn't come back. And that's like their new beginning or their season of the witch where they just went off the rails. So part 6 was when they were like, okay, we need Daisy back, we need the killer back.
I love it. And as soon as you tell people that they shouldn't check out previous work, they immediately are going to be searching for that previous work. So
yeah, you could probably find some stuff. You're not going to be entertained, I can promise you that. The Susurrus was where things got good, I'd say.
Challenge accepted. So Frogman is basically an urban legend found footage film, I guess you would say. Super interesting, but like one of the things that really struck me is just how catchy the name is and like the poster art for it. As soon as I started to see people posting about it, it just immediately grabbed my attention. Like you can't brush over a Frogman poster. So it grabs you. Was that part of it? Like, was that part of the intention to make something that people just can't pass up?
The funny thing is, I wasn't sure if the name Frogman was going to be enough. Like we talked a lot about like the title and should it be more than that? Should it be Finding Frogman? Should it be the Loveland Frogman? Like, and it was, we were just like, let's just call it Frogman and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that I'm stunned and totally excited that everyone was as interested in that title as I was, because when I found out about the Frogman, which is based on a true legend, I was captivated. I had to know more about what the hell the Frogman was, especially when I saw an image of him holding a magic wand. I was like, this is not your average cryptid. Um, and the poster, the brilliant poster, that was done by Easton Hawke, who I found because when I found out about the Frogman, I started looking up everything Frogman related, and there's a lot of fun fan art out there, and his piece was probably the best that I saw. He did like a Frogman rendition. And then through that, I found he does tons of cryptid stuff. He's a big cryptid guy, incredible artist. So I hit him up to see if he'd want to do our poster, and we're so lucky that he said yes, because
Yeah.
that poster is incredible and it's done so much for us when it comes to people finding the movie. I think a huge part of that is people finding the poster first.
Absolutely. And you were mentioning like, is the title enough? One of the things I think that some found footage films do that I think they would benefit from maybe taking a page in your book, they'll do titles that are a little bit more obscure and you don't like this one catches you. But I'm thinking of like there was that movie about like trying to find a Sasquatch, and I think it was called like Willow Creek. And
Yeah,
like that's almost too mysterious, because like if I saw like a Sasquatch on there and like the title had something about Sasquatch, if I love Sasquatch, I'm gonna go watch that. I
right.
love frogs. I saw this and I was like, Frogman, that is badass. I need to see this. And yeah, and I wasn't let down. It lived up to all my expectations. But another part of like my discovery of this, which I thought was interesting, is you've become part of this like new found footage-esque like filmmaker group, which I feel like they're kind of all supporting each other's work. And I wasn't even sure if you were aware of that, but like Robbie Banfitch, we've had on the show, he did the Outwaters. He was sharing this a ton. Like I think he kept saying how much he appreciated this work. And I think that's kind of showing like, I think it's cool that like filmmakers are kind of bringing each other up versus like, trying to be competitive and take each other down.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like growing up being a film fan and like paying attention to who's making these movies and the behind the scenes things, there's all these kind of waves of filmmakers that kind of like come up together. And you kind of like look at that as someone who wants to make movies. You're like, wow, could you imagine being part of like for instance, like the Splat Pack, in the
Yeah.
early 2000s was like
Yep.
James Wan and Eli Roth and all those guys, like Lucky McKee. So, I mean, obviously, like none of us are trying to do this. It just happens like by happenstance. Like I met Robbie at a festival when he was there with the Outwaters, and we were in post on Frogman, and it was like, oh wow, okay, so other people are still trying to do new things with found footage. Cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the horror in the high desert came on my radar, and the incredible stuff that Dutch is doing with that series. And then we started talking, and so like we all got to meet in person and hang out because there's a found footage specific film festival in San Francisco that
That's
happened
right.
in March.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, it's really really fun. I guess it's just there's just something, like they talk about the hive mind. This is one of those hive mind things where all of a sudden there needed to be another resurgence in like just down and dirty, no budget, found footage movies.
For sure. And this was your first full feature length film, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what challenges did you experience doing a full feature length compared to like doing shorts or doing the segments and scare package? And was it everything you dreamed of?
Everything and more. And all the nightmares too that I dream. Um, I'll say the biggest thing that I was always concerned about when it came to that jump that proved true is like keeping your tone consistent and knowing what your tone is, because everything I'd done up until this point is like a 3 day shoot, maybe a 3.5 day shoot.
Mhm.
So no matter what you're doing, it's easy to keep the tone consistent over like 3 days. But when you're doing a feature, I was always like, man, what is it like when for scheduling reasons you got to shoot something from act 3 in week 1 of filming, and you're still kind of figuring out what this is, because in my experience, at least, unless you have like James Cameron money and you literally build your own world, like there needs to be a lot of room for exploration for everybody that's on set. You know, you as a director and all the collaborators you bring in, everything I've done has never lived up to the vision in my head. And that doesn't mean I'm not happy with the things that I've made, but like they all just like kind of take a life of their own when you bring in other collaborators and you're on set making it. So that did prove difficult. Like we shot things for Act 3 early on in filming that ended up not really like melding with
Yeah.
where the story was naturally going, you know, as it was evolving in real time in front of us. So there was things from like Act 3 of the movie that we rewrote and reshot like 3 times over,
Wow.
which is kind of crazy. And I hope we learned a lot from that. We won't run into that again necessarily, but yeah, that's and I think the found footage aspect is a big part of that too, where they're just like is even more of a need for improv and malleability than if you're doing something where you have an entire shot list and like you know where you're shooting and the lighting and all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's just a lot of flexibility.
So I'm so glad to hear you talk about this because like it really does highlight actually some of the strengths of this film, because the film in the like if you were to divide this into 3 acts from first to third, there's so many things that like change the direction of the film. It takes a lot of like turns and you end up in some places that from the start of it you never would have imagined you're going to go. But what you said about the tone, I think, is you still feel like you're in the Frogman movie. It doesn't feel like, oh wow, I feel like I'm watching a different movie now. So I think you did a great job, or you and your team did a great job of maintaining that tone so that it was believable that these characters are still like basically they're the same characters and the story still feels like it makes sense in the greater scheme of it, from start to the very, very final scene. You know what I mean? Like the character arch, kind of seeing those emotions of the character, it all kind of worked well. So I think actually hearing you say that, that you're totally right. Like that for some filmmakers, that would have been such a challenge to keep the tone like so yeah, consistent, I guess. So
Yeah,
nice work with that. I appreciate that a lot.
thank you. Yeah, it was, I feel like with found footage, something I was worried about is like, I do consider this satire. And when it comes to doing found footage satire, um, I mean, there is like kind of like scary movie versions of like found footage
Yeah.
things I haven't seen, so I don't know how those worked out. But for me, it was like, we have to take this seriously. Like, you know, even though we're making found footage satire and we're dealing with a frog with a magic wand, this still has to be really happening to the people in the movie. You know,
Yeah.
they have to be in peril and in danger. They don't think this is funny and they're not acting like bombastic because of it. Like trying to keep that grounded and hoping that people would still realize like you can laugh at this, you can think it's ridiculous, you can think it's funny, like going along with the satire and still just instead of being like, oh, they tried to make a scary movie about a frog and totally failed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was something like tonally we really tried to stay true to.
So let me ask you, this has been available to watch for a little while now, and I know it's going to be hitting Screambox shortly this month. I think it's like June 7th, so it's a couple of days away.
Mhm.
So far, what's the feedback been like?
I mean, mostly really positive, to my surprise, because like when you're with a movie for 3.5 years, you don't really know what the hell you've done anymore. And you're
Yeah.
definitely, when you're watching it for the millionth time, it's not doing anything for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
I can
not.
only imagine.
So I really wasn't sure until people started reacting like, is this interesting at all? Is this fun? I don't know. And, you know, I mean, found footage is very divisive, and
Mhm.
we do a lot of things in our movie that are kind of the the tent poles of divisiveness when it comes to found footage. It's a slow burn start, you know, like things like that. So there's a lot of people that are pissed off for sure. Like lots of hate, but not even close to as much love as we've gotten, which is so nice. And even from like, you know, Ohio locals and Loveland locals that know about this legend, like I haven't heard anything negative from those fans that are finding the movie. Like everyone's just really excited to have a Frogman movie, so that's been awesome.
Cool. Let me ask you, what's the best piece of feedback you got, and what was the most hurtful, if you don't mind sharing?
Ooh, that's tough. Um, like a lot of people shit on the fact that we shot on high eight,
Oh,
or not a lot, but
yeah,
there's
yeah,
been a few people that are like, why this takes place in modern day and it's shot on high eight? It doesn't make any damn sense. And I'm like, well, I can't even take this review seriously because you clearly weren't paying attention to the storyline. We made sure that we gave like logical reason to why we
right.
shot on high eight in 2020, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so that's been a funny one. The most hurtful, honestly, nobody's feedback, no matter how much they hate the movie, could ever hurt me,
yeah.
honestly, especially with like how much love has been poured towards
Mm.
this movie. That doesn't affect me. The only thing that hurts is there's only two instances of someone directly like DMing me on Instagram to tell me how much they hated the movie and it should be taken off of Apple or whatever.
Oh
And it's
boy.
like the disgrace that it's even like on these streaming services. And I'm like, damn, I cannot even fathom watching a movie and disliking it to the point that I have to message the filmmaker and tell them they should take it off because no one should see this. So that kind of hurt. You know,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
hate the movie and you can give it a pilot review, and that's fine. You're entitled to and most of them I think are pretty funny and interesting to read.
yeah.
Slog Man, that was maybe one of my favorite reviews.
Slog man.
And someone just called it Slog Man. uh, I love that. It's funny, you know. And we knew when we made it, this is not a movie that is going to be universally loved. It's
Yeah.
going to find its fans, hopefully, and there's going to be a lot of people that it's just not for, you know.
What an amazing time where that we live in today, where people watch a movie and immediately like feel like they should be able to contact the filmmakers. Like imagine think that thought like 15 years ago, that didn't exist. We watched a movie, if we hated it,
Right?
um we just sat with that. That's it. But now we're like, I gotta let them know. It's like,
Yeah. And
okay.
again, that was two instances since it came out, and I like countless instances of DMs from people just telling me how much they loved it, you
Okay.
know. So like
Yeah. And
the,
I've only
the
read
fans
positive stuff
are
in my experience with this film, which was what kind of brought the hype for me. So yeah, it's June 7th. This is gonna be available to a much wider audience on Screambox. I'm sure that's exciting.
that's so awesome. Yeah. Oh my God. It's so fun that like we released this movie back in February and it's just kind of having these like waves of new life, you know, which each
Yeah.
VHS release and then, you know, each new streaming service we're on and stuff like that. It's awesome. I'm excited for like a whole new group of people to find it now.
It's gonna be kind of insane as of June 7th, just to see that outpour of feedback about this, because it's like you said, it comes in waves.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to be a wave because that's going to hit a lot of people. So
Sure.
brace yourself. You might get a couple of DMs, but mostly it's going to be positive, I think.
I'm
Um,
prepared now.
the best line in this film by far is "Frogman fucks," which when that was said, I was like, genius, genius, genius. These characters are they're interesting because like they're very likable for the most part, but at least one of them has his moments where it's like, I like him, but do I like him? Um, I'm what like less about how you wrote him, more what I find challenging is I was thinking about what it must be like to be an actor in a found footage film. That must be like one of the hardest things to do, because you have to somehow make it seem like you're not acting and just be very real, but also you're still not being yourself. I just can't imagine it. Like, have they expressed how difficult that is, or did it seem challenging for them?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a learning curve there. I think Chelsea, who plays Amy, like probably had the easiest time getting in the groove because she comes from like a stage, like a theater background.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's more like theater because it's like the camera is there and you can look into it, you can spike it, you can pay attention to it, but also like we're almost living in this 360 world where like unless there's like an effect or like a key moment we need, it's pretty loose. Like we can go anywhere and say anything and do anything. um I'd say like after the first week, like with the progression of us shooting, they all warmed up and it got a lot better. And like when I watch the movie, I can tell what stuff we shot later and what stuff we shot earlier because there's
Yeah.
so much more loose. But I think they all ended up having a really good time with it. And something that really helped was we wrote these roles for these actors. Like we didn't write these characters and then try to cast. Um, so we really wrote them so that they could mostly more or less be themselves.
I like that.
So Nate's a whole lot more fun in real life than Dallas is. But
Um, so tell me about your discovery. I didn't actually know that the Frogman is a real cryptid. So tell me about your discovery of the Frogman and what made you want to make a film about this.
I mean, we were shooting a short film that was like coast to coast inspired. Um, the old radio show, and that my co-writer was directing actually, and I was DP on. And something that he got for art direction was this map of the US with a cryptid in each state to represent the state. And in Ohio was the Frogman. And just we were all just like kind of studying this map in between takes and started looking into the Frogman and trying to figure out what the hell he was all about. None of us had
Yeah.
ever heard of him. And Nate was there too. Nate was acting in this thing. Um, and we just became fascinated. And like very quickly, John and I were like, we should write a found footage movie where Nate is going after the Frogman. Because like seeing him get excited about discovering the Frogman and like looking into it and like reading us the sightings and all this stuff was just so much fun. Um, and I've always loved found footage, like the good and the bad. Like I think there's so much there. It's a huge pile of movies. So like
Yeah.
there's a lot of shit for sure. But I mean, in every era, it's not to me. It's not like it's not just the Blair Witch and Cloverfield and Paranormal and that's it. Like there's an incredible found footage movie like every year.
Yeah.
You just usually don't hear about it unless you're looking for it. So I really love the genre, and I was really excited to play in it and like figure it out for ourselves. Like, why is the camera rolling? How do we make it believable that they're still letting the camera roll? Something we really wanted to play with was like uh giving you characters that you maybe could connect to and care about. Um, because even in some of my favorite found footage movies, I don't remember any of the characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that was something we wanted to do. And like with
Yep.
writing the sequel right now and getting ready to do the sequel, like
Yes.
we that was something that was really exciting, is like, whoa, we can make a found footage sequel where the characters come back, because we didn't, like some
Yeah.
of them are left. and
Yes.
and so like to figure out like how they have evolved since the first movie, and like how they've changed because of what they went through in the first movie, is just like a really unique thing that you don't see in found footage a whole lot. And then again, figuring out why the camera is rolling again, because if they went through this, why the hell would they be
Do
back
it
with
again.
another
Yeah.
camera? So it's just been such a fun like problem to solve.
So, the interesting thing, because you mentioned like found footage has certain like formulas about it, right? And if you make a sequel to a found footage movie, though, like I feel like you kind of have to break that formula because some of it's not necessary. So you had mentioned earlier about like it's sort of a slow burn in the beginning, as most found footage films are. I was kind of thinking about that. That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you is, do you think that there has to be a formula to found footage? Because there's like the character build, and then we get into kind of the development, like there, you set up for there's something to fear, and then you have like, the climax. Um, if you make in your sequel, you won't need that first like slow burn piece. So
Yeah.
it might be like kind of it'll be a different type of film. I think. I'm trying to think of a found footage that has had a sequel.
Yeah. I mean, like, I really love some of the later Paranormal Activity movies, like
Yeah,
even more
there
so
you
than
go.
the first one, honestly, but they are very formulaic.
Mhm.
Um, they figured out something that works and they replicate it over and over. And the later ones do add new fun elements to it for
Yeah.
sure. So I don't think found footage needs to have a formula. And I think some of the best found footage comes out of people throwing the formula out the window and like trying something new. I mean, Paranormal Activity created a new formula.
Yeah.
Screen Life movies, they created a new formula that now exists and people replicate all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the fun of it. I'd say Hell House LLC. I had never really seen a found footage movie quite like that. And now they keep replicating their own formula.
Yep.
That's something I really didn't want to do though. I really don't want to make the same movie twice.
Yeah.
Especially after 3.5 years, like I would probably rather die than than make that movie again. So it's gonna be
Right.
a very, very different movie. And as you said, we don't need any of that slow burn lead up.
Mhm.
For me, like what we've said since the beginning, John and I, is like, okay, we ended this movie at like an 11. We need to start Frogman 2 at an 11 and then like ramp it up from there.
Yeah.
So
I
we'll
think
see
that's
how
what
successful
that,
we are.
that's what makes me excited about there being a sequel to this. And I was going to ask you that because I was like, it very much could have one. There's no reason not to. But yeah, that makes me excited because you can get right into the action pretty much. So that's amazing. Was when you guys were looking up cryptids and all that, was there any other backups that you're like, oh, that's an interesting one too?
Well, so I mean, I'd always like paid attention to cryptids before Frogman, although clearly not deep enough to know about who
Yeah,
Frogman was.
yeah.
We really built the movie around Frogman. There was never any other cryptid. Although since then, like the floodgates have been opened, and I know about every single weirdo monster there is that you can imagine. And I really like the misfit ones. There's a
Yeah.
lot more out there like Frogman that you just don't hear about on a regular basis unless you're looking. Like you always hear about Bigfoot and Mothman
Mhm.
and like those guys, but there's some really, really weird ones. And yeah, there will be more than just Frogman in the sequel. And I would like to play with more cryptids in the future too.
Jeez, we're gonna have like Godzilla versus Kong, but just like a bunch of cryptids. Frogman
Yeah,
versus who knows? It's gonna be awesome.
that we can feel that we're heading that direction. I don't know how that works out necessarily, but
Yeah.
we'll figure out when we get there.
He is like this interesting character too, Frogman, because he's like kind of adorable, but he's like very dangerous. Um, and one of the impressive things though is the look of the Frogman. Like I felt like he looked great. You do get some good glimpses, so you have to have a costume that holds up. Was
Mhm.
that challenging to make sure that it didn't look too fake, I guess?
It was pretty challenging because well, we didn't know like how much of Frogman we were gonna see. I had moments in mind, but like the people that made Frogman, Ryan Shadley and Becky Ingram, I've worked with them for a long time. Ryan I've worked with for over 10 years, and he's the first person I always talk to whenever I'm making a new movie because all I make is horror really, and the effects are the star of horror movies, more than any actor in it, honestly. Like you make a creature feature called Frogman, Frogman's the star.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we going to do that? But shooting found footage, it was like we didn't have these specific shots figured out, and well, we're only going to see him from this angle, and we're only going to see him in this lighting. It was like I don't know, we just got to see him we got to be ready to see him from head to toe, I think.
Mhm.
Um, so they made a full bodysuit. They did know going into it that they had the forgiveness of high eight.
Yeah.
So that's something we're not going to shoot on high eight again for the sequel. I'll tell you that. Like for me, like that can't be justified again. He did it for a really specific reason in the first movie, and why a camera is rolling again in the sequel, like it doesn't make any sense for it to be a high eight camera.
Yeah.
So like we've already talked about, like the new Frogman suit has to hold up to higher scrutiny. Because we're gonna get a better look at it. But yeah, the cute factor, that was something that was really important to me from the beginning. Like we talked about, should he look sinister? Should he look evil? Should he look dangerous? And I love frogs and I think they're adorable. And I
Yeah.
was he's got to be cute. And I think you should just kind of be neutral. Like frogs don't emote; they're just very neutral. So
Yeah.
like, let's try that. And the one I got to post it at some point on Instagram. Like the key image that we used for reference, or that I gave him as reference of what I think Frogman should look like, is like the most absurdly adorable, like bubbly-eyed, like micro frog you've ever seen. It's like sitting on somebody's thumb. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
let's do this, but as a 4 foot monster.
I pictured it as like an evil what is it, Wind in the Willows, or
Yeah,
the Disney Toad, Mr. Toad or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting character. I absolutely love it. Um, yeah, so make with the frog, like I think that you're absolutely right. Like that was definitely in my head. Like we're definitely benefiting seeing it from the camera. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of what you're able to develop with the, the higher resolution cameras that you'll be using in the next one.
Mhm.
Um, you've mentioned being a fan of this subgenre of horror. I was just curious, do you have certain films that you recommend for people to watch that maybe they've overlooked?
Yeah, well, I think this movie does get a lot of love, but I think it still gets overlooked also as above, so below,
Yeah.
because it kind of came out at the time. There was like a big gap of like between like when Paranormal Activity came out and like nowish, where there was a lot of great found footage coming out and nobody was like really taking it seriously. I think that one got more love than most, but still, like I just rewatched it and I was like, this is so fucking good.
Hmm.
It's got like so many, like it's really unique. It's
They filmed in the
genuinely,
catacombs, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
that's amazing.
underneath Paris, and it also like has this Indiana Jones aspect to it too, where like
Mhm.
they're like solving puzzles and going into the depths of hell. It's like it's so simple and yet like really really effective.
Yeah.
Um, I do love Willow Creek. And that was definitely a big influence for Frogman. Although you don't see anything in that movie, and that's something we have to rectify.
Right.
I think that's one of the best Sasquatch movies ever.
Yeah,
Ironic.
I really like that one, but yeah, I agree. It would have been nice to
Uh,
get a reveal.
what else? I'm trying to think of some new ones I've seen. Frankenstein's Army is insane.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
that movie is freaking wild. It's shot. I can't remember. I think it's like supposed to be like you're following Russian soldiers like in World War II, Germany, and they end up in this laboratory where this guy is just making all these like insane like creatures out of like soldiers. Um, and it is like you won't believe how many different monsters you see in that movie. It is like it's nuts.
So I haven't seen that one, so I'll have to check that out.
It's really wild. And then one more that recently came on my radar, and I can't believe that it came out in like 2015. It came out a long time ago, and I'd never heard of it. It's called 1975 something La Possession. But if you look up 1975, it should come up. But it's a found footage movie that takes place in 1975 and was shot on film. Um,
Okay.
I can't think of anything else like that. It's so good.
There was, and I always forget the title. I'm probably gonna say it wrong. There was this alien one too. Phoenix something.
Oh, Phoenix Forgotten?
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked that one as well. I just thought it was an interesting one just because like the idea of the aliens added something different than what we had been seeing
Yeah.
before. And there's someone in that I think is notable, and I'm totally spacing on it. It's been a while since I watched it.
I
But
can't remember who was in it, but I'm pretty sure Ridley Scott or Scott Free, his company, produced it, if
okay.
I remember correctly. But yeah, that I like that one a lot. The ending is fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That one always stuck with me. And you mentioned Hell House LLC. I'm like such a huge fan of those films.
Yeah.
Um,
It's fun.
I had one more question about this film that I wanted to ask you, and I meant to ask you this earlier actually. So one of the things I found interesting is, and this isn't a spoiler for everyone who's listening, but at the very beginning of the film, this young boy spots Frogman, which kind of spawns this, this quest to discover Frogman again as he gets older. But as he's discovering Frogman, his parents are arguing, and I think we're under the understanding that they eventually divorced. So when he, decides to go on the quest to find Frogman again, his sister says something like, she's like, I understand what it means to you, and kind of alluding to like the divorce of her. So I feel like she almost feels like she's saying to him, if you finding Frogman's not going to bring her parents back, or it's not going to make you feel better about their split.
Yeah.
Is that something that it's an interesting message. I appreciated it. I thought it was like actually like I love stuff like that because it's like it's emotion, it's real. Like that's something that people really experience. Like when something really big happens in a family, like you find things to kind of like feel like you're gonna fix or rectify. Um, whose idea was that, and like kind of why was that element added, if you don't mind me asking?
That's a great question. That's something that like is so far back in the process. I don't even it's hard to remember how we got there. Um, but I love that take on it. And that's absolutely the idea is like that was like the last trip that they took as a family before
Yeah.
the divorce. Um, so yeah, you got it. It's not just that he's latching onto Frogman because like what a crazy awesome thing to see and become obsessed with. He's latching onto it because it represents like the last time his family was a family for him.
Yeah.
And that's something he just like is it kind of has this unhealthy attachment to because of that. And it's funny, we didn't make this movie thinking we were ever going to necessarily expand upon it. I think it wasn't even until we finally got to a point of nearing the end of editing that we started to feel free enough to think about what would happen next
Yeah.
before we even knew if we would do a sequel or not. And that's something that we want to explore a little bit more is like, is there more to go into there? Like, where did his dad go? Like what's he up to now? Like, why did the divorce happen? Like, we've kind of come up with some fun reasons for that to come back and mean more.
I like that. I think it was, I wasn't sure where that storyline right there, that little piece of it was going to go in my interpretation without giving spoilers. I will say I feel like the very final scene kind of sums it up. Like, it kind of comes back to that without even actually coming back to it like verbally. I think it's a
Yeah.
drawback to that statement that his sister says. And I just like that it's a little thing added to it. It gives the movie a little bit more depth, a little bit more emotion. And just overall just rounds it out. It was I really enjoyed this film. So Anthony, thank you for discussing this film with me. Thank you for sharing Frogman with the world. I know now that I am definitely going to be researching Frogman a ton because I love cryptids, and like this is one I hadn't known. So yeah,
Yeah, of
thank you for bringing this light to the Frogman.
course. Well, there's a Frogman Festival every March.
Of
So
course.
in Loveland, Ohio. So you should come out next year.
Amazing. Are you going to be at the next one? Or is this something that you're going to revisit every year?
Yeah, yeah. This in 2024 was the second one. It
Okay.
actually hadn't happened when we shot the movie, and then the first one happened the March after we had shot Frogman. It was like, oh my God, like whoa, there's like this fandom. I didn't even know if there was much of a fandom for Frogman, and all of a sudden this thing happened. It blew up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll keep going for sure. It was so much fun to bring the movie there last year.
I know you said that Willow Creek was an inspiration, and I feel like this film is going to do for that town what Willow Creek did for their town. Because like I never forget watching Willow Creek and being like, "Is this real? I have to go to this town and see all of this stuff." Like a town that celebrates a cryptid this way is so amazing to me. Like when places just embrace weird stuff, I love
The
it.
funny
So,
thing is, like I looked into it before we shot, and they like Loveland did not embrace Frogman at all. And even this festival that takes place is put on privately by like
okay,
a fan. It's not put on by the city. The city had like little to no like ownership of Frogman. And now this festival is done so well, and I mean maybe even because of the movie bringing so much attention to it, now they're kind of getting on board
yeah.
and want to embrace Frogman. So it's like kind of wild that like, yeah, maybe the next couple of years that town will really look like it does in the movie.
I mean, they have a bumper sticker right there. Loveland loves Frogman. Like, come on. All right, Anthony. So thank you so much again. And everybody, make sure you check out Frogman. It's going to be on Screambox June 7th. So make sure you catch it then. If you don't have Screambox yet, I mean, we've been saying this for a long time. Hop on it. It's a great, great streaming service, and they get these amazingly unique projects all the time. So, Frogman is just a perfect example of that. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you later.